Hey, what is going on guys? Groge Gaming here. Welcome back to another Clash Royale video. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Now for today's video, I'm going to be going over my balance change wish list. Bit of a mouthful. Yeah, we're going over that for today. And I'm going to be going over the buffs, the nerfs, and the cards that I think are kind of balanced right now. So these balance changes I've kind of put together recently and just been working on them, trying to think about what would affect the game, how it would affect the game, and the best way to kind of nerf and buff cards to positively impact the game. So I do have stat breakdowns of the changes that I want to include. For example, like if a card gets a HP buff, it's going to be by percentage, and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go over the buffs first, and then I'm going to go over the nerfs. So let's jump right into it and get into the buffs that I want to introduce in this April update. Another side note is that I based a lot of these changes and these balances off of different stats. I know Woody put together a recent thing on Reddit about the top decks and the top usage rates on cards for the top 200 on ladder. And then I've been looking at Royal API for the top win percentage cards in Grand Challenges and the most used cards and whatnot. So I've kind of collated all of this information and the opinions of pros to give my best opinion on what should be changed. So I hope you guys agree. If you don't agree, let me know, and let me know why as well. And then give your opinion on what should be changed, because I'm interested in seeing that. So we can have a little discussion in the comment section to see what the best options will be for these balance changes. So the first buff for me has to be the Knight. There's a reasoning behind that, and it's to do with the Ice Golem and other tanks in the game. So the Knight, I believe, needs a bit of a HP buff again, just to bring him back up, because I think before they nerfed him by 6% on the health, and I'm just going to give him a 3% health buff, just to take him up back a notch, to get those cycle decks, you know, the hog cycle, which I love, kind of bring that back a little bit, and just to bring him back into the game a bit. I feel like he's dropped off a fair amount, and then Ice Golem usage has just risen and risen and risen, and that could be partly to do with the to do with the princes and the fact that the Ice Golem is so good at kiting them. However, I feel like if we bring back the Knight a little bit, then Ice Golem usage might be reduced as well. So I feel like he just needed that extra bit of love. This next one might be a bit controversial because it was kind of hated before, was a very big card in the game, and it is the Skeleton Barrel. The previous nerf on this card reduced the skeleton count by 2, so I want to just add one of those skeletons back and just see how that affects the card and whether that will bring it back. And another reason that I want to bring that back is because I am having a few more nerfs to bait cards, so that with the reduce of other bait cards and the increase slightly the buff to this one might kind of bring it back in to a reasonable standard where it's not overpowered in that kind of bait style deck. Okay, this next one is the Bomber, which kind of comes out of nowhere for some people, I guess. However, the Bomber just doesn't really get any love, I feel. It's so underused, maybe even in lower arenas as well. It can be a little bit overpowered when it's a bit higher as a common, but I definitely feel it's very underused. So I give that a 10% HP buff, because I felt like it dies way too easily. So this kind of might just bring it back up into the meta a tiny bit, probably not, but I just want to see it get a little bit more love. So that might help it, who knows. These next two changes are kind of controversial, but with some reworks I think they could work in the game. So we've got the Royal Giant, which I believe should have a hit speed decrease from 1.7 to 1.6 seconds per shot, and then a 5% damage increase. So it's the DPS that kind of gets buffed there, just to give it that kind of advantage as a 6 elixir card. Does a lot of damage from the range that it should, and then also change it, kind of rework it maybe to be a rare card or something like that, so that it can't be ridiculously over leveled and kill lower arena players. So I think that would kind of work, but obviously it takes a lot of work from Supercell to implement that, and how do you go about the common card to rare change. But that's just what I think should happen with the Royal Giant. Next we have the Elite Barbarians, which I know a lot of lower arena people might hate me for, but I believe they do need some kind of a buff, and obviously the same kind of rework as the Royal Giant. It needs to be changed to rare or something like that again, so that they don't get over leveled to level 13 down at 3,000 trophies, and it just, you know, where they just wreck. And I think the change for this should be a deploy time from 1 second to 0.8. Because the thing about Elite Barbarians is they're supposed to be quick, they're supposed to be dangerous, they're supposed to be scary. So if you decrease that deploy time, then they're just going to be even scarier and maybe pack that little bit of extra punch really quickly that it needs to be in the competitive kind of scene. Maybe not, maybe they need another change, let me know. We're moving on to the rare buffs now. So we've got the Fireball. And this isn't necessarily a stat increase or anything like that. It's just a kind of time thing. So I got this from Colton and I thought this was a great idea. And it needs to be just faster. It needs to hit faster. So it needs to hit the arena faster to give it that uniqueness to kind of differentiate it from poison even more. So it hits the arena a lot quicker than it currently does. Or it will give it that kind of boost that it needs to compete with poison. So yeah, that's the change for Fireball, and I believe that could work pretty well. Next we've got the Valkyrie, which is another tank option that doesn't get a lot of love, to be honest, based on all the stats and usage rates. She can be pretty good lower arenas, but I think she still needs a bit of a damage increase at 3% I went for, so plus 3% increase on damage. I was fairly reserved with this because I didn't want her to just have a crazy amount of damage increase, which will just make her OP or anything like that. So we're just going to see you now. I would kind of like to see how that would affect the game. Just a 3% maybe can be used as more of a tank in sort of like a hog trifecta deck, maybe instead of Ice Golem or instead of the Knight. That could work very nicely. She just needs a little bit of love, really. The next card I've chosen for a buff is the Bomb Tower, because let's be honest, the Bomb Tower doesn't get any love whatsoever, and I just really feel like it needs it. Maybe just some more damage to bring it in line with these other cards that just do so much more on defense, like Tesla Cannon for 3 elixir. This is a 5 elixir card and it just gets no love, so it definitely needs some damage, maybe 5%, maybe 10% damage increase, so that it can really work on those tanks, as well as having that splash to hit behind on the supporting troops. Maybe needs some love. Don't know how that's going to work. That could work, I'm not sure. Next we're moving on to the epic buffs, and definitely the Barbarian Barrel. It's been introduced fairly weakly into the game. No one really uses it, I would say. And a change for that you could do would be to have it to knock back more troops. So like the princes, because it currently doesn't knock back princes at all. So I definitely think it should perform more like a log, in the sense that it should knock everything that the log does. I think that would make it really, really good. And give it kind of a uniqueness from the log, in the sense that it has the barbarian that pops out as well. However, people will still opt for the log because it's 2 elixir, and then you can combine the log with an ice spirit and stuff like that. So I think making it have the same kind of mechanics as a log wouldn't make it OP, because the log is cheaper. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Barbarian Barrel. The next one is the Skeleton Army. I believe maybe it just needs one extra skeleton to make it a bit more effective, because it's not really used anywhere apart from the very, very low arenas. So definitely think it needs a bit of love in that sense. Next is the Bowler. The Bowler needs some love, and the change that I think it needs is to be able to knock back the princes. So each bowl that it does, those big bowls that it throws, I do believe it should knock back princes. And obviously that is an indirect nerf to the princes as well, because then the Bowler might come back into the meta and it might be able to control those prince decks a lot better. So that is definitely a change that the Bowler needs. I don't think it needs any other change like HP or anything like that. It's good, it's tanky. It does its job for the most part, but there's just too many cards that are better at the moment, so it needs to be able to knock those cards back, if you see what I'm saying. Another epic change for me has got to be the Lightning. It definitely needs to come back into the game for sure, and I think the way to do that is just revert the old change that happened, and bring back the radius to 3.5 from 3 tiles, keep the stun duration the same. It should then be able to compete maybe a little bit better, but I definitely think having that Lightning in the game would help. The next one is the Giant Skeleton, and I believe the bomb needs to explode a little bit quicker, and also it needs a plus 10% damage increase whilst reducing the hit speed to 1.6. So that gives it a slight DPS buff, and also the bomb exploding quicker I believe will make it more effective. For example, if it gets taken down by 3 Musketeers and then the 3 Musketeers start slamming on your tower, you want that bomb to explode really quickly, and I believe speeding up the bomb timer might actually help it fit into the game a little bit better, because right now it's a bit gimmicky, or it can be at times anyway. Next we've got the Magic Archer, and I believe it just needs a bit of a damage buff at 5%. That will increase its damage to about 100, I believe, and kind of make it compete with all these other splashy cards. Because it's so weak, I think it needs that extra bit of damage, because it's got very little HP. It gets taken out by Fireball Poison, so it needs that bit of extra damage to compete, especially against all these spammy decks. It needs to do its job quicker. Next we've got the Mega Knight. Obviously they killed the Mega Knight last time, and so we need to revert the changes a little bit, but not too much to make it overpowered again. So I've stuck with the previous changes that they made in terms of the spawn damage. So spawn damage was originally nerfed by 25%, and I believe that was fine because it just had too much of an impact on the arena to begin with. However, I believe that the jump effect needs to be buffed back a little bit. So I went for a 16% jump damage increase, which essentially reduces the jump damage nerf last time by half. So they took down the spawn and the jump damage by 25% last time, but this 16% increase now, based on the current stats, would reduce the nerf by 12.5% on the jump damage. So that might make it a little bit more effective and bring it back without making it overpowered. Next, we're going to move on to the nerfs, guys, and I believe these will help the game a lot. And the first one is obviously going to be spear goblins. I think this is the first on everyone's list, pretty much. I believe their hit speed needs to go from 1.1 seconds to 1.2, just to take them down a little bit, but without killing them from the game. So I think that would work pretty well, and obviously that would nerf Goblin Gang indirectly, and also Goblin Hut indirectly as well. I think that would be a very necessary change to stop this very spammy meta that we've got going on right now. The next one is bats, which follows in the same kind of spammy trend. They need to have their hit speed increase to 1.2 from 1.1 seconds, just to kind of bring them down. They get so much value for 2 elixir sometimes that it's ridiculous, especially with all this zap bait meta going on. You can really get value out of them sometimes. The next one would be Tesla for me. It's just too strong as a building, and it works too well in quite a lot of decks. So the hit speed, I want to put that to 1.1 seconds from 1 second, just to bring it down kind of in level with everything else. Kind of give Cannon a little bit more love then. Maybe Inferno Tower can come back in too. Who knows? The next card for me, I believe, would be the Ice Golem. Needs a bit of a nerf on the HP at 5%. I think that would work, kind of bringing it down whilst bringing the Knight up and the Valkyrie up a little bit. So kind of getting those mini tanks on the same level. Then we have the Goblin Hut. Obviously the Spear Goblin nerf would affect the Goblin Hut, but I still think it needs a tiny bit of a HP nerf to kind of make spells more effective against it. So maybe a 2% HP reduction on that might bring it down a bit, because it's still very, very annoying and probably one of the best spawner decks, spawner cards in the game still. The next change for me, this might be a bit controversial for some people because a lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it, but I think the Tornado does need a nerf. It's just too good and it outclasses a lot of buildings for only 3 elixir, so I'd kind of like to see a reduction on the radius for that. So it's currently 5.5 tiles, maybe reduce it to 5.25 just to kind of stop it from being able to pull everything in so well, but I still think it should be able to activate the King Tower. So whatever the tile radius would be, that it still activates King Tower nicely, but doesn't have that full range. I just want the range just to be reduced a bit, just to rein in its power and kind of bring it down to where it needs to be. The next cards that I think need nerfs are pretty obvious, and you've probably worked out by now. It's the Princes. They need a nerf for sure. They're just so strong, especially Dark Prince. It's just 4 elixir, does so much damage, does so much splash, so effective, and has a very high win percentage in a lot of decks. And so the changes I'd like to see on the Dark Prince would be a hit speed increase from 1.3 to 1.4 seconds, so that changes the DPS a little bit, and then also a slight HP change of about 2 or 3%, just to take the edge off him and stop him from being so strong. The next one, obviously Prince. I think the damage is fine because he is meant to be a very strong card that does a lot of damage, but it's just his health. He clings on to the arena just for too long for my liking, so maybe a 5% HP reduction would help him, kind of bring him down back to the level where he needs to be, and stop him from being so strong, especially paired with the Dark Prince. All the changes combined with the kind of the Tornado nerf, the Bowler buff, the Barbarian Barrel buff might kind of bring the Princes back to where they need to be. So both Princes have had nerfs, and there's also been indirect nerfs to them as well. So what we don't want to do is completely kill them. We just want to bring them back down into a good standing in the game. I think these changes would diversify beatdown decks because of the Lightning, obviously, and Tornado not being as strong. You'd have to work your way around people's Inferno Towers. I think Bait could come back potentially. So I think this would just diversify the meta a bit better, instead of it either just being double Prince or spam. Let me know your opinions on my balance changes, whether you think they're good or bad, and what you would change. I'm really interested to find out. But either way, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to join the Groge gang, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.